Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
If you are partnering with someone, that person needs to be capable to grow your business. Otherwise, he's a friend, have coffee and leave it at coffee. Don't bring your emotions of college life into your business, you will fail. Introduction does say Quizmaster, but I promise you I'm not here to ask you a single question today. So relax, all right? On the contrary, I would probably answer the questions that you would have in your mind for someone, who stands here with a profession that's probably symbolized by that symbol that's on your screen. It's a simple symbol, it's a question mark. I always have three things that cross my mind when I deliver such talks to youngsters, and that's for us to understand and accept certain ground realities. Here's the first one. People don't like questions. I think all of us agree to that statement. We don't like questions. Second, people don't like being questioned. Who likes someone who comes and asks you questions, do this, do that? And it starts from very early age. When dad and mom ask you questions at home, to a teacher who asks you questions, to a friend who asks you questions, to a boyfriend who asks you questions, or a girlfriend who asks you questions, we don't like questions. So there comes the third platform. People don't like people who ask too many questions. Do we all agree with this? Yeah? We don't like questions. We don't like people asking questions, which is why one of India's, if you actually rate on campuses and schools in India, what do you hate most? I think rank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 will be exam. We hate exams. We hate tests. Why? It's fundamentally because you hate being questioned. Now, if that statement on your screen is true, and we all agree with that statement, here I stand in front of you telling people, I'm going to ask you questions and you're going to pay me for it. And I'm going to run a company paying people to prepare those questions for which you pay. Now that sounds impossible. Why would you pay anyone for something that you don't inherently like? And that's our business model. So were we nuts 15 years ago when we got into this space, wanting to ask people questions and try to make a revenue model out of it? But it has been a really topsy-turvy journey. I'm going to share with you more of my failures and our failures than the success stories, because that is what you need as youngsters if you're going to get into this. I'm going to be really honest about what we went through. And here we were, getting into what is a 200+ crore industry built on a questionable business, technically speaking. And everything looked fantastic. We came out of these schools like this, classmates, batchmates. All those are nice, fancy stories. But the reality of it was, you finally had to run a company, and we started one. And everyone gave us a lot of advice. And like at most B schools, they teach you the 4 Ps, the 4 Ms, and all sorts of things. So we got into the business and said, okay, there are 3 areas that we can get into in the quizzing space. The first and foremost was entertainment. 15 years ago, you came from an era when everything revolved around television, and television meant entertainment. The second area was people need engagement. People need entertainment that would provide engagement. So we said, fine. The third area was, people said, well, there's also a little bit of education that people require. And quite honestly, that was our focus. Entertainment first, engagement second, education at a later date. So that's really how we got into this entire space of trying to create a company that would do quizzing in this country. And just to set the platform right for you, if you go back 15 years and 10 years prior to that 15 years in this country, there were only 2 successful quiz companies. Just 2 successful quiz companies. One was Mr. Siddharth Basu, who does phenomenal work with his company. The second was Derek O'Brien, who's today in Parliament. Coincidentally, they both come from an era and a lineage from a city that pretty much gave India quizzing, which was Kolkata. In an industry dominated and used to facing quizmasters which came from Bengal, here comes a guy who's trying to enter that space with a name called Giri Balasubramaniam Iyer. It's the most wrong combination to get into that space. First of all, the name is too long. Second, you do not have a Banerjee or a Mukherjee after it. It was a non-starter, technically speaking. And I was quitting a Walt Disney job to get into this. So, like many of you, every time you are at a crossroad, you go back to your batchmates for help. And like always, I had a 50-50 advice from my batch. Half of them said, Giri, go ahead, you're on the right track, do it. The other half says, Pagal hai kya, jahan naukri hai, reh ja. And I remember working in Walt Disney in India, which means I was doing extremely well when it comes to finances, etc., and all of that. Now, to move a little further, there were a lot of people who gave me advice and said, you have to expect the unexpected. You're getting into a business where there's nothing much that you know, so you got to expect the unexpected. And, well, soon enough, the unexpected happened. Here's what happened. People without a job can be a serious threat. Here you are trying to get into the quiz business and trying to become a quiz master, and India launches a big quiz at the time when we were trying to start a company with a man called Amitabh Bachchan, who was without a job at that time. He was jobless. His movies were failing. He was close to bankrupt. It's unbelievable today to think that that was Amitabh Bachchan's story, but it's true. And what resurrected Amitabh Bachchan's life was a quiz show called Kaun Banega Crorepati. But what would that mean to someone like me, who 15 years ago was trying to get into that business? Do you even remotely imagine, even today, being able to compete with an Amitabh Bachchan, even if you're an actor, let alone being a quiz master? There's no chance. So what you thought was your first E in this business was out of the window simply because of the power and magnitude that this game changed into. So technically speaking, we failed even before we began. You didn't know where to start. You got a business plan in place. People say, expect the unexpected. The unexpected happened, and it happened in the form of a big B. And it was like, Bachchan versus Balasubramaniam, and that's like two Bs to fight with each other. Well, not something that I asked for, but it happened. But we learned a lesson. And the lesson for you youngsters is this. Everyone tells you, expect the unexpected. There are enough management institutes, today there's data analytics, to tell you what is unexpected that you can expect. The lesson that you learn is this. Accept the unexpected. That is more difficult. Trust me, friends, when you run a business course for 15, 20 years, accepting reality is far more difficult than expecting something unexpected to happen. Because when something unexpected happens, you can still blame the environment. You can say, I didn't expect this to happen, so on and so forth. But to be able to stomach that reality is what you require if you're going to be successful tomorrow. So if you are not a person who can take knockdowns, don't try and get into entrepreneurship. Be willing to fail, and be willing to fail when you do not even imagine that it can come from somewhere. We got knocked down. So lesson number one, accept the unexpected and learn to move on. Then came the second part. We launched a portal. We're talking of a young man. They're doing wonderful work, and there are a lot of people in my office who've been part of Inside IM and so on, so I'm very familiar with what they do. And it's really nice to see a young entrepreneur and his team here. But date back, and I'm talking to you about late 90s, early 2000, when the word .com was a phenomenon. And we were all over the newspapers, launched a portal called quizbrain.com, world's first ISO portal. Everything happened, so everything was going upwards. Excellent. Along with all this euphoria, This is what was also happening, which is the revenue chart. There was absolutely no money to make in the online business. You were putting up fantastic content. You were having a lot of people. You're talking of 1 million page views in 1999, 2000, 2001. That's unthinkable. That's like probably a few billion today. I don't know how much you multiply it by, but that's the reality. So when you have certain expectations that you build, and the reality is the converse of that, you've got a sticky problem. And this is the lesson we learned. Popularity is not equal to profitability. Learn that very early in your lives. Most people tend to think that if you start becoming popular, you are going to be profitable. They're two completely independent aspects of business. Please understand that popularity does not automatically mean that you are going to be profitable. And it's a lesson that we learned, and we learned very quickly. Then came the burst of the dot-coms in 2002. We had a huge amount of funding. In fact, we would be among the first dot-coms in the quizzing space, not even quizzing space, in the knowledge space. $12.8 million funding is what we had, 2001. And then came the entire crash after WTC fell. The entire economy went completely bust. And as youngsters, just to give you a sense of what happened, and perhaps a large majority of you here wouldn't have even been born, or you'd have just about been a thought around that time, here's what happened in this world. $5 trillion. Allow a moment to sink that into you. $5 trillion got wiped out only for technology companies by the end of 2002. It's more than the figure that our Prime Minister is talking of, an aspiration for this country. And it got wiped out in one stroke. Imagine the aftermath of something like that. In terms of business, that would be like an absolute bloodbath. And it just wiped like an epidemic companies out. From dot-coms, it almost became dot-gons. You know, they were around and they were gone. And that's really how it all unfolded. So you needed a lot of tenacity to stay. And I remember a professor of mine gifting me a small little message. And that made a lot of difference to me in my life. It said something very simple. This is all it said. And I have that book with me even to this day. Sometimes, when you are really figuring out where to go, the best people who can stand by you are your teachers and your professors. It was a simple line which said, the whole world steps aside for the man who knows where he is going. And sure enough, we're extremely proud as we celebrate 150 years of this great man. All he knew was where he was going. He didn't have anything with him. He had no guns, he had no army, he had nothing. And he got the world's largest population democracy without a single battle. That's what you need to learn from someone like a Mahatma. And when you learn something like that from him, all he did was something very simple. He just refused to give up. And all he did was he knew what he was doing. So all you need in your business is enormous amount of clarity on where you are headed. And as youngsters, it's very important for you to get that. Please learn this lesson. Never allow business to be driven by money. I may be a contrarian advisor to many of you youngsters here today who sit down in hostel rooms and sit down at coffee shops and think how to get your first round of funding. Where do I find an angel investor? Where do I find the next venture capitalist? I find a lot of youngsters who come to me for advice spending 80% of their time trying to find money and not trying to find time to build their ideas. Take it from me, your best venture capitalists are your salespeople. If your salespeople can get you the money that you need to run your business, you don't need venture capital. And I'm talking to you after getting $12.8 million in funding, learning the hard way, and then building another company, technically speaking, as Grey Caps, with absolutely zero funding till today. For the last 15 years, I've not gone out and taken 1 rupee, not even a bank loan. That's what I learned. Today, in front of youngsters like you, it's an applause. But 15 years later, that was painful reality. It could have been gone. I mean, completely gone. So please understand, don't get into this trap of easy money that's available outside. Don't ever get into that trap. And I was very close to funding. I was extremely close to funding from various people. And one of those lessons that I learned, and I'm eternally grateful, was actually from Mr. Narayan Murthy. We were doing a lot of work for Infosys at the time, and then he started a fund, and we were looking at help from that fund to get a couple of crores and not too much. He saw me one day and he asked me, "What are you doing here?" So I said, "Sir, we're looking for some funds." And he called me and he asked me, "What's your math? What are you doing?" And I told him. He said, "You go home. You don't need funds." I said, "What do you mean, sir? I need funds." He said, "No, don't do this, young man." He said, "Today, you want 1 crore, 2 crore, they'll ask you for 30% or 40% of your company. Always take the funding when you are not at the receiving end. Build your company, build your revenue, build your clientele. People will come to you and tell you, 'I want to fund your company.' Be in that position." I'll never forget that lesson, and I share that with youngsters like you. That left us with a very important question. What next? And it's never easy to answer questions like this. And fortunately, in a country like India, we start facing these questions in our families from class 9, class 8, when, 1 year later, you're going to write class 10. And a lot of relatives who we've never met before will call and ask, "Beta, 10th mein ja rahe ho, kya karne wale ho?" And you're thinking, saying, "I haven't decided what to do. Why are you so worried?" That's the reality of our country. But the reality is they prepare you. They prepare you to answer these tough questions by always asking you, what are you going to do? So it's an important question to answer. And we did. We invested in 2 things. The first thing we invested in was people. You will go nowhere as an entrepreneur, even if you've got the best idea in the world, if you do not invest in people. Most important learning in that, don't invest blindly in people. I'm being honest. I'm being practical in giving you this advice. There are a lot of you youngsters who love this romance of "हम दोनों एक साथ हॉस्टल में थे, हम दोनों साथ में चांद देख के सपने देखे थे, साथ में काम करेंगे, साथ में मरेंगे." If you are partnering with someone, that person needs to be capable to grow your business. Otherwise, he's a friend. Have coffee and leave it at coffee. Don't bring your emotions of college life into your business. You will fail. Please understand that very clearly. And please bring people. My young friend spoke about his dear classmate, and he spoke about how that's not a bad thing, because I'm not contradicting what he says. He says a good thing when you partner with someone is you share value systems. I love that line coming from a young guy. Figure out whether your value systems are right. But just because you otherwise like doing the same things with that person does not mean your business values match with each other. Your other interests in life might match with each other. You might have grown up in your college watching Sunny Leon together. That's perfectly fine. But do not allow that to become the foundation of your business. You're in trouble. Be clear on that. What is important for you as a youngster tomorrow, if you're going to run your business, is you need people in your office who will ask you difficult questions. I may be on national television. I may be big brain, whatever the world looks up at you as. The reality is, when I walk into my office and if I'm speaking in a meeting and my ideas are not good, there are 25, 28, 30-year-olds in my office who will turn around and tell me, "Giri, I don't think that's a great idea. I don't think it will work." Some people will be even more polite and even more honest and tell me, "In your generation, it would have worked. It won't work now." And sometimes they make me feel like I come from Indus Valley civilization. But it is true. It is very true. 25-year-olds can make you feel that way. But the reality is, are they bringing something meritorious in their argument to the table? Take a look at the value of their advice and not whether they're good friends to you or not. So be very, very, if I may say, non-Indian in your approach to business. A lot of countries like the United States, a lot of countries like Japan, etc., do very well when it comes to business because they're not emotional in their business. They're businessmen-like in business. Build that tenacity in yourself. Keep your friends to after office hours.